I'm gonna move you in the middle, Cait.
Okay.
If it okay, look. We can see your screen through your Jeffrey Dahmer glasses. It's awesome.
I know.
Wait, you can't have her in the middle though. You need to you need to keep us separated. We're about to go at it.
Okay, I'll keep you separated.
Mediate.
I am pretty much a mediator, but I don't know. How's sorry if I'm a little. I literally just got back from from the airport, just pulled in. So,
and it doesn't really matter where we put her anyway. Wherever she is, that's where everyone's going to be looking, and everyone will just be listening to us.
Well, that's why I put her in the middle. It's like all the attention goes to the middle. But anyway,
she's taking the attention either way.
Hi. Melanie says hi to Lynn. Hi, Melanie. I'm just going to repeat their conversations. Oh, T-Bird, morning all. And Alyssa says good afternoon. All right. So today's show was supposed to be basically, it still is, basically a recap of a preview of Mayhem Classic. And you both sent me your picks. I was doing the graphics, and right when I was about to send you guys the graphics or post them online on Instagram, I get that text message or the alert saying that, two athletes are. As soon as I got it and I saw Mayhem Classic, I was thinking it's either two things. I thought they're announcing a workout or some athletes were dropping out. So I think that's probably the best thing to start off with, is kind of just talk about that. We both got the news. And unless, Brian, you wanted to start off with something else.
No, we just stopped being able to hear you for a second. No, but it's this is great. And Patrick and I spoke about an hour ago about this, and I think this is actually kind of, I don't want to say it's nice. I mean, we're losing two huge athletes from a competitive competition that were certainly in the running for podium spots, games qualifying spots, etc. And they're just super popular and fun athletes to watch. But we're entering into a stretch of competition that we haven't seen in basically 5 years since the sanctional time period, and this is even a little different than that, where there's going to be high-level competitors at high-level competitions who are trying to navigate a season that's a little bit unfamiliar. And I think that what we saw from you can start that comment, by the way, Patrick. I'll adjust this guy who's terrible, inappropriate name, but relevant question later on. The athletes are trying to figure out how to navigate this season just like the rest of us, because it's new and it's kind of unprecedented. And we've heard athletes talk about this, sort of hedging their bets, right? So if you get an invite to something like this, you're going to accept it. And in the past, we media people in general have sometimes been critical, or at least observant of the fact that there's no the athletes aren't held to any standard where if they decide not to show up to this, they don't get, there's no penalty for that. Yeah, they lose out on the opportunity to qualify, or they lose out on the opportunity to earn the money, but the competitions are at the mercy of the athletes to show up, no matter how good the competition is. And in this season, unlike the previous year's game season at this time of year, where someone like Danielle Brandon would only have one possible opportunity to make it to the CrossFit Games, which is a goal of hers for this year, as it is almost every year, that she would probably suck it up, whatever the circumstances, and just try, because there's no other options. But right now it's March still. And she knows that a month from now, there's an online semifinal, and that the week after that, she has a contract that's dependent on her showing up and competing in a WFP. And that if the online semifinal doesn't go well, there's still at least one more, possibly two more options for her in May and June through Syndicate Crown and NorCal, which could potentially invite someone like her to make it. So there's a lot of different paths. Plus there's the last chance qualifier, which I don't even know what's going on with that this year. The point is, I don't think this is going to be a one-off. I think we're going to see recognizable names pulling out of competitions throughout the spring, because they have to take a chance, but they also have to take the best chance for them. And if, we Patrick, you have some updates. Someone was asking about both Danielle and possibly Brooke that we can share. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you do that now. But I think that we'll see more of this, and it's understandable because of the nature of this season.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that, obviously, the first thing that the journalist sent me, the sports journalist sent me, the analyst sent me, I really wanted to know. I mean, just like everyone, want to know why.
Oh,
And
not everyone actually. There's some people that really could care less why, as long as it's good for them.
yeah. But yeah, it's just speculation. But that's the thing is like I like reaching out to the athletes and asking them, or in this case, I reached out to their team, their representatives, and we were able to talk to Cooper from Lad Manager, who manages they manage DB and one of DB's best friends, vice versa. And he basically just said DB's she's like 90% right now. She's dealing with some nagging injuries, which I think we talked about this, Kate, maybe me and you or Brian. You know, professional athletes very rarely are they at 100%. It's just very hard to be at that level when you're a high, especially in fitness. But he basically said that DB's about 9% dealing with some nagging injuries, and she'll be good to go soon, and isn't going to rush into things. And it's a long season ahead, like Brian was referring to, and but that's where we are with DB, which is we've talked about it. Caitlin, DB as probably as well as anyone here. In terms of her history with injuries and dealing with it, and she hasn't been 100% since probably 2021. But yeah, that's the reason why DB, and it's kind of expected. When I reached out to Todd Mulaney, who represents Brooke Wells, he said Brooke is very excited about the upcoming CrossFit Games and WFP seasons. 2025 will be the most in-person competition of her 13-year career. With that in mind, she's decided to focus on her preparation for the online CrossFit Games semifinal and the WFP Tour event, both of which will take place in the next 6 weeks. She's disappointed to not be competing at Mayhem this year because she knows it will be an amazing event, hopes to have another opportunity in the future. So that's a statement coming from Todd on behalf of Brooke Wells. So a lot of what Brian was referring to, so those are the official statements.
Kate, before you make your first astute statement here, just push the glasses up your nose a little bit.
I do think it's an interesting choice, though, because Brooke Wells was one of Brian's picks to qualify. Danielle Brandon was one of mine. It easily could have been like a one and done for them, possibly, and get it out of the way for the rest of the season. And to me, I wouldn't want to lose out on a chance, especially with all the things coming up with WFP and the rest of the CrossFit Games season. I would want to get it out of the way if I could. So interesting that they chose to withdraw, but I also saw, Brooke I thought about that yesterday in Houston, I think. So she's out traveling, doing other stuff too. So I'm not as much as surprised to hear about her as Danielle Brandon.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of commitments for the athletes right now. This is a busy season for athletes. We all know that the season is, it changes every year. It seems like there's a format or whatever. And typically semifinals falls in May. So this is about a month earlier than typically athletes are used to. I don't know. I think ideally it probably felt like when they accepted the invites, it was probably like, yeah, hell yeah, Mayhem. I know DB did the inaugural one back in 2020. It's a great competition. I wish I could be there to watch it. But I think initially, sounded better than. It's easier to say yes and retract it than say no and not have the opportunity again or the opportunity. So it's just unfortunate. Like again, it didn't get backfilled. Especially there are so many good athletes that, I mean, I was talking to, some athletes here. I mean, like someone like Tyra Milligan, who's just down the road in Nashville, would be an excellent choice to backfill here, or any of the proven athletes, or in-house, they still have, someone, maybe ask someone like Bailey Rail. I mean, you have Paige Powers competing, who's less than 100%. Maybe someone like Bailey Rao, who's maybe not competing at that sense. I would say like Jessica Andrazik or Sydney Smith, but they just did Crash Crucible this past weekend, so they're probably
Crescendo
this weekend and team, or Zoe or any of the Mayhem athletes in house. But I think they pretty much exhausted all the Mayhem athletes in house that would still keep it at a higher level. It's just unfortunate that like Brooke and DB aren't going to be there. Still doesn't mean it's still going to be a great competition, which we'll go over. But yeah, Nashville is right down the street. About 2-hour drive. It would have been really good. It would have been really cool to see Brooke out there and DB.
I want to address this one from Aster Serve. How are you going to promote these events without even knowing who shows up? A mess. I would say that's a little harsh. I mean, the competitions can't really do much about something like that. If they say, if the athletes tell them that they're coming, and they could promote that they're coming, and then they can make updates as they learn about them. It's always a disappointment when a marquee athlete or someone that's a draw that may attract a live audience or a virtual audience isn't able to make it with late notice. But it does happen in sports all the time, and there are other workarounds. I mean, this has become an issue in the NBA, for example, over the last decade, where players are just wanting to take nights off, and people are like, dude, what? Like, you only come, LeBron James, you only come to play in Indiana once a year, and you're not going to play in this game. Like, I was looking forward to the only chance I was going to have to watch you play. And then you have the NBA that pushes back and says, hey, like, we need you guys to play in these games. Like, you're the reason why they're coming. You're the big superstars. And then the players can push back and say, hey, but our schedule is too demanding. The thing is that we haven't reached that point of this sport yet, because the athletes have refused to come together. They had a chance to do it after the games this year, the best chance that they've ever had. And I don't think the best decisions were made. And now we still have athletes that are at odds with each other instead of unifying over a common objective, which would be to have a relevant voice. And then we could have and we don't even have a relevant league right now. We have mixed things that are going on. So that would be an ideal situation, but it seems like, unfortunately, we're a far way away from that.
I do like this comment by Guy. Rebecca Devine's a perfect example too. That would be she's coming off a really good open performance. She's a Mayhem athlete. I think she works out in Hendersonville, which is about an hour away. But obviously she would have been really cool. But anyways, we have a field of 18 women, 20 men still.
Wait, can we look at this? This is the busiest season we've seen. Athletes are learning to Navidad.
True.
Love that.
Yeah.
A little Spanish influence on the show.
Yeah, I had a week of Spanish, or 4 days of Spanish. So, yeah. But 18 women, 20 men. I believe that gives us 30 of the 40 or 30 of the 38 athletes with games, individual games experience.
I wasn't sure where you're going with that. Let me address this comment first before we get into the picks here.
Okay.
This guy, Peanut, I thought Brian wasn't covering the game season. Yeah, I mean, I did. I probably said something very similarly to that more than one occasion, and this was a difficult conversation that I had with Patrick. But what I look at here is trying to separate what we're doing as B.Friendly Fitness and what CrossFit is doing, which is something that I don't agree with. So just to be super clear, I don't agree with the company that's supporting Dave Castro's continued involvement in the sport. And so I won't be personally attending any competitions that are directly related with him being involved. And it's why I didn't pay to sign up for the Open this year. But this is not about Dave Castro. This is not about the CrossFit, the company of CrossFit for me. This is about the athletes. And this is an incredible group of athletes. Rich and the guys at Mayhem have made a return to the competition scene after having a super successful Mayhem Classic 5 years ago that also attracted a stellar group of athletes. Most of these are people that I know really well, that I'm super excited to get a chance to compete this year and to have more competitive opportunities this year. And at the same time, there's other media sources in North America that are they're frankly being offensively selective about how they're covering the sport. So we will be continuing to do this for the exceptional fields around the world, not just for the ones that our friends are competing at. And I think that Patrick and I, and now Cait as well, have a lot of value in terms of helping people who want to understand this sport appreciate how good these athletes are, even if they're not one of the best 10 athletes in the world, because no sport can survive off of just 10 athletes. You need to have people who celebrate the achievements of athletes that are on the way up and chasing those goals. And that's what we're all about. So that's why I'm doing this.
Well said.
Cait, you're relevant.
I'm relevant now.
Well said, Brian. Yeah. I was getting some questions about that. And like Brian said, we did talk about that. And, the purpose of B.Friendly was always to cover the sport, the athlete, and the community. We've covered many events that weren't CrossFit related. I mean, I mean, more than half the events we've done the last couple of years, they weren't registered CrossFit licensed events. Does that mean that he's not covering CrossFit? I mean, Wadapalooza wasn't a CrossFit licensed event. Rogue wasn't a CrossFit licensed event. So does that mean that everyone that covered those particular events are against CrossFit? No, it just means that not everything is CrossFit. They are doing CrossFit, but it's not CrossFit licensed. So, but at the end of the day, again, a lot of these athletes, these competitions, the community that's involved with them, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing this. That's why me and Cait decided to do the open coverage, and we plan on doing a lot of previews for a lot of semifinals. There might be some that we do attend. Brian is elected not to attend, but that's just him. That's a personal decision. That's not a B.Friendly decision. So, but we do appreciate the support, nevertheless. On a lot of comments here, but how can you say my name is offensive? But anyways, so where should we just go dive right into it?
Yeah, I mean, the women have been up here on the screen, so let's start with the women, and you can keep this graphic up, or I think you probably want to pull up the graphic that has our picks side by side, right?
I do. Boom.
Patrick, before we get into it here, do you want to remind people about why you're not doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I always make some selections here and there, but I probably won't be doing this as much. It's just simple. With me managing some athletes and having personal relationships with a lot of these athletes, I just found it's a lot better if I didn't. I am guilty, and I will admit I'm guilty of. I try to be not as biased as possible. And when it comes to picking, it's like, if it was up to me, I'd put like Andrea Sober or Sahara Kai. I put all of them one too. That doesn't really put me in a good spot when it comes to becoming an analyst. I think I'm pretty good about separating the two, but that's probably why you won't be seeing me do too many picks. I will offer my opinion on some things and either agree or disagree. But in terms of making selections, probably won't be doing much of that in the foreseeable future. So sorry about that.
All right. If you're not familiar with this format that you see on the screen here, basically I sent my pick and so did Cait. Patrick aggregated them together, and then he highlighted the names in red that had the biggest discrepancies one way or the other, which are obviously usually the most kind of interesting athletes to dissect when two people disagree by a larger margin. Only a field of 18 now on the women's side, so obviously there's not too big of a range here, but the premium for finishing in those top spots is very high. It's not just like Cait said, the earliest and first chance to qualify to the games, which is a goal for most of the athletes who are competing this weekend, but it's also got some significant money on the line. I mean, it's more, if you win this competition, it's more than you would have won ever in the history of the sport in a regional or a semifinal, which have been previously CrossFit's iterations of qualifying events to the games that they have hosted. There is the prize purse breakdown there, and obviously the 10th place pick is only 250, or finish is only 250, but it's something. And I would say those top 3 spots are good payouts, and the top 2 spots go to the game. So that's ultimately what the athletes are competing for this weekend.
So let's start. I mean, I guess we could talk about before we made the changes, before the update. You originally, Caitlin, had DB at number 1. Actually, Brian, when I brought it up, Brian, all he did was shift everything up. You actually shifted things around a little bit. Your picks that you gave me this morning versus what you gave me an hour ago. Some major changes. But your number 1 pick, I think you had Alexis Raptis at 2 anyways. So she slid up to number 1.
Yep.
And Brian had Alexis as 1 originally. Why Alexis Raptis? Especially Brian. Let's start with you. Why Alexis? You have Raptis winning it off the bat. What makes you think that she would have won or will win in this field?
I mean, as far as Alexis goes, it's very much in alignment with the assessment that I had when we did the kind of preseason power rankings for WFP, which is just that I think she's coming into her own in life in general, and it's translating to elite performances on the competition floor. I think that she has a chance this year to really cement herself as one of the 5 best athletes worldwide this season, specifically in the sport of competitive fitness, and potentially to even be in the top 3 of major competitions. You know, Tia may not be in some, Laura may not be in others, and obviously that opens up a door. I think Alexis is a prime candidate to occupy several podiums this year.
Cait, what do you like about Alexis?
Everybody's saying that she's healthy, and people have been talking about her for years now. And now that she finally has everything kind of figured out, she seems like a really solid athlete. I didn't pick her as first place originally because I thought that was like the safe choice. And I really am like a Danielle Brandon fan. I went back and looked, and Danielle Brandon got 3rd back in 2020. I know it's been like 5 years, but the workouts really aligned to her wheelhouse. So I was really hopeful this year that we were going to see her get that first place. So I originally had Alexis 2nd, but with DB dropping out, I feel like it's almost a no-brainer that she'll probably win this weekend.
By the way, fun fact, at the 2020 Mayhem Classic, Tia won 5 of the 6 events. Who was the only one to beat her?
DB,
right?
Yeah, in a handstand walking workout. So, and finished 3rd. I believe who was 2nd? It was
Christy Eramo, I think, was 2nd.
Yeah, Christy Eramo was 2nd. So, but yeah, now we start getting into it right off the bat. Brian, you went with Paige Semenza. Originally, you had Brooke Wells at 2nd and Paige in 3rd, but you know that moved.
Yeah, I think did I not have Danielle 3rd? But either way,
you did. I'm sorry, you had Brooke 2nd, Danielle 3rd, and then Paige in 4th. So.
Yeah, I had originally thought it was going to be really tight between Alexis, Brooke, and Danielle, and that 2 of those 3 would likely take the game spots. And then I had a group of women, probably 5, the next 5 women you see on the list, that I was kind of thinking as the next most likely to kind of break into that top 5. And I decided to put Paige Semenza at the top of that list. I think she's pretty well rounded and pretty tough, and I think that the workouts in Mayhem will demand that. So I don't think that she'll take too many bad finishes. The one maybe knock on Paige Semenza, she doesn't have that home run potential. So that's why I had been kind of hesitant to put her against women that do have the home run potential and are also very consistent, those other 3. But I think that she's, you know, a bit underrated. And even though she's a little older than some of these women, I feel like she's still getting better, and her placements relative to the other women in the top of the sport are getting better. And there's almost every single ranking that comes out, I would say even appropriately so, there's comments that come in that say, you guys, not just us, anybody is constantly underrating her. And I'm kind of tired of doing that. So this time I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt, and let's see if it pays off.
Speaking of underrated, Cait, you picked someone in your 2nd spot. That's someone, I mean, she's relatively new, hasn't been around as long as Paige, but she's been someone that's kind of been overlooked and underrated, been kind of quiet this offseason, did do Wadapalooza, but you moved Abigail up to 2nd, and I forgot where her original spot was that you had for her, but why Abigail at 2nd?
I think that she is definitely slept on. I mean, she won West Coast Classic last year, which I think surprised everybody. She had a really solid performance, I think, at Wadapalooza. I think she's like a silent killer. And I can't remember, maybe 4th, or I think maybe I had her 4th place originally, but with the dropouts, I decided to move her up because I think that she can definitely make a splash in it. It looks like it's going to be typical, like traditional CrossFit, and I think she'll do really well there. It is kind of a wild card, but same with Brian's pick with Paige. I'm kind of taking a bet on her to take 2nd.
I personally, I like both of those picks. With the absence of DB and Brooke, I think we are going to see. Obviously, I think that second spot, like Brian said, it's going to be close. I think most people probably put like someone like Haley Adams or Fee. Fee's been really hot, and we'll talk about Fee here in a second, especially in the off season with the qualifiers. But let's move down to the 3rd pick. Haley Adams at 3rd. You have Emily Rolfe. Really no big change. I mean, you have Haley Adams at 5th, Cait. Brian, you had Emily down at 7th. And remember, she is a podium finisher at this past year's games. Now, granted, this is only 6 events, I imagine, over a course of a weekend. Obviously, more events help out Emily. But do you want to talk about that Emily pick, or both of you want to discuss why Emily at 3rd and 6th for you, Brian?
Let's let
Okay.
Cait kick off on this one.
I originally had Emily in 5th because that's kind of been her average finish at all of the semifinals. So again, with the dropouts, I moved her up. I know we know at least one event, which is a running event. She typically does really well in those. So bumped her up a little bit. And again, she has been a podium finisher, so she can definitely deliver. But she got moved higher because of the 2 people who have dropped out.
I think this is accurate, and the schedule, as I understand it, is pretty much 5-hour windows of competition. So it's going to be more in alignment with what you're used to seeing if you watch the Dubai Fitness Championships on Saturday and Sunday, where the athletes are basically doing 3 hours with relatively short amounts of turnaround, 60 to 90 minutes between events. And it does test athletes' recoverability, which is something that we talk about all the time, in a way that's a little bit different than what you might see at a traditional at semifinals, which are not traditional. They're different all the time, where you have similar number of events but strung out over 3 days. So that certainly is an element of it. Look, I mean, whether it's Abigail Domet or Emily Rolfe, which are 2 athletes that I have a little bit lower here than Cait, I'm not putting as much of an emphasis on their best performances from last year as Cait is. And, that's because I'm looking at what they've done elsewhere. And basically what I'm saying is I don't think that the West Coast women's field stacks up to the East Coast women's field, and that the success that they had in West Coast Classic was a little bit inflated compared to what it would have been if they'd competed against the full slate of athletes in the East Coast. Like, I don't think there's any chance that Abigail's winning that, not even podiuming against that field. Top 5 would have been quite a feat. Maybe her performances would have got her about 5th. And then Emily Rolfe would have been flirting with, the top 10 instead of the top 3 or 5, just because it's a stronger field. Emily's finish at the games, I think, will prove over the test of time. She did have one podium finish in Dubai, but it was nowhere near the caliber of athletes in 2022 that she competes against more often than not. And I think that 3rd place finish will be an outlier in her career, just like the 2019 podium finishes from Jamie Simmons and Kristen Holte were. And that, you said her average finish in semifinals is about 5th. Fair. But when it comes to competitions that are a little bit more robust, she usually drops down towards the 8 to 12 range, which is kind of where I had her here. She moves up a few spots with Brooke and DB being out. So that's where I'm just kind of favoring the strength of the field in the East versus the West. And that's why you see women from the East Coast filtering towards the top.
Let's talk about both your guys. Let's talk about Fee. I mean, Cait, we've talked about Fee for the last 3 weeks. Ryan, you saw how she did in the qualifiers for WFP. I mean, Fee right now. Fee looks like she's she's up there. We'll talk about him with the men, Colton Mertens. Just one of the hot athletes out there right now when it comes to online qualifiers and so far this season. Your thoughts on Fee this year and her chances at Mayhem.
Good. I think Fee's chances are really good. I was messaging with her a little bit this morning. She's always one of the athletes that when she sees the pic, she uses it as fuel, which is what I love. And she made it very clear to me before she had heard that Danielle and Brooke could potentially be drawing out, but she said, even if they're in the field, there's no chance I'm finishing 7th. I'm going to do better than that. And I love that confidence from her. And I think that she absolutely should have that. I mean, don't forget that the elite level success that we've seen from Dallin and James, they've been working with Matt Torres for a lot longer than she has. And again, similarly to Paige Semenya, even though she's pushing closer to 30 and she's 5 to 6 years older than some of these women and then those guys she's training with, she is still getting better. And I think that Matt is still finding ways to get more out of her. They're in the gym together every day. And I think that's pretty difficult at this point, if you don't think that he's the best coach in competitive fitness, to at least put him in the conversation with the success you see on the men's side. And she's the athlete on the female side that he's invested the most in. And I think that there's still more juice to get out of it. And I think this year we could potentially see some good things from Fee. The contrary to that is that the success that she's had online, and we will talk about this with Colton also, has to be proven in live competition. It's a different beast. It's a different reality than doing it in the comfort of your gym, where there's a little bit more limitation on the programming. So I was hesitant to put her too high, but I do think that she has an outside chance to get a top 2 spot.
Okay, your thoughts on Fee?
I mean, I think it's hard not to love her. So sweet, and I think everybody wants her to succeed. And she was, 4th place might be a little high. I do think she has a fighting chance. And like Brian said, she did exceptional in the Open this year, but that is going to translate differently in in-person competition. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, she did well at Crash, right? This past fall? I can't remember what she got at Crash, but top 5 for sure. And I know, again, different competition, but really hopeful that she at least finishes top 5. If she secures a spot, that's great. I'm just not sure that that's going to happen here with the rest of the field.
No, yeah, she did actually pretty decent in a really stacked field at Crash with implements that she's not. I mean, JR's been known to program some like odd object type stuff, and that usually favors some athletes that are a little bit taller, bigger, that are used to working those type of implements. But I thought she had an impressive showing at Crash Crucible. But yeah, you're right in terms of fee. She's kind of peaking in the right direction. Speaking of peaking, Avera says peak fitness is a season-long process, and Mayhem comes only 3 weeks after the Open, as opposed to semifinals in past years. Open finish more important than in years past, e.g. Haley's nowhere near peak. I kind of agree with some of that because, again, you had a lot of athletes not really preparing for the Open. They can make it to the 1% just on their base fitness and not peaking. So for them to turn around and peak within 3 weeks for a semifinal, that might be one reason why some of these athletes did withdraw. Is like they just weren't ready to compete, or whether it be travel or injuries.
There's also the potential that someone like Haley realizes I'm not going to place top 3 or win the Open, which is where the money's at. All I need to do is make the top 1% to keep myself in contention for the season. There's a big competition coming to my hometown a month from now. Let me get ready for that. And I don't know if that's the case, but that's kind of what I'm hedging my bets on with Haley here, is that she wants to put on a good showing at home. She has, a place that she's called home, and I think that she's going to have a good weekend. I think that she'll probably have she'll probably take a hit somewhere, but we've seen even in 6 event competitions that you can take a hit, and if you're pretty good across the board, you can still do well. I'm expecting her to have 2 or 3 top 3 finishes in events that are, if the programming is in alignment with what we expect to see at Mayhem, there's going to be some stuff that she's amazing at, and I think it's going to keep her in the mix.
Cait, your thoughts on Haley Adams and how she might compete, how she might look this weekend?
I didn't honestly think about it, how Brian just talked about maybe not prepping for the Open and just kind of getting through it to get through it, and maybe prepping more so for this in-person competition. The only reason why I really put her higher than somebody like Paige is because it is going to be Mayhem programming, and she's a Mayhem athlete. So hopefully she'll be maybe a little bit more prepared or ready for whatever is to come. She's a great, obviously, at running. We have a running event too. So hoping for the best. I think it is maybe a little high. 5th place might be a little high. I'm not super confident in that pick, but again, the only reason why I really put her higher is because of the programming.
I will say, like the Mayhem, which is happening April, the online qualifier doesn't happen until May 4th, I believe, or 1st through 4th. So these athletes do have a month. For the ones that withdraw, they have a little bit longer, obviously, because now they don't have a high level in-person competition that they just competed in. So it does give some of those athletes a little bit more time to kind of get, especially in like the case of DB, who's at 90%, that gives her an extra month to get to 100% to compete in that online qualifier, online semifinal, which has 11 spots. So a little bit, you can have a little bit more and a larger field. So the margin of errors won't hurt your margin of error if you mess up in an event. I don't know how many events the online semifinal will have, but it won't affect them that much because you have so many other athletes competing in there middling. So there are some questions in there about the preparing for the online semifinal. So I was just addressing that. So that pretty much gets us through the top 5 minus Shelby Neal. You have Shelby Neal at 4th. You have her at 7th. Shelby Neal is an athlete I know, Brian, we've really watched evolve since Syndicate Crown, 3 years ago, from an athlete who couldn't do a legless rope climb to save her life to spending a whole year just getting better at it. And now she's turned into someone who's a perennial top 15 athlete, and trending the right way.
Top 15. I don't know about that. Perennially, maybe, but she's good.
Yeah.
She's really good, and I think we have the same 7 women in the top 7. The order is mixed up a little bit, but that's not a mistake. I think these are now the athletes to beat in this, and yeah, Scott, Shelby being a dark horse pick here, it's even hard to call it a dark horse pick. Like I feel like I could say a lot of the similar things about Shelby that I said about Fee. Like she's in the mix here. Like she can absolutely get the second spot on the podium. She's gonna have to have a great weekend to do it. I don't think that she's necessarily strung together even a perfect semifinal yet. Last year was pretty good. But yeah, this is a wide open field and Shelby's absolutely in the mix.
I feel the same. I'm the least familiar with her, if I'm being honest. And I just think that it's a really stacked field. And I think the other women in the field might do a little bit better than her. But like I said, I know the least amount about her than I do the rest of the top 7. So.
Yeah. So that gets us through the top 7. And then I think there's like a middle group there. I think, Brian does, whenever he does like these picks, he usually sections them out, put tiers. I think we hit into the next tier, and there's some varying differences here. But let's talk about Claudia Gluck and Andrea Nisler. You have Andrea Nisler at 8. You have her at 9. Just someone who's familiar with Mayhem programming. She's won 3 team titles with Mayhem. She I don't think she follows Mayhem anymore. She runs her own CrossFit Timberwolf CrossFit up in Minnesota. But won the Masters division. You have her at 8. Brian, you have her at 9. Go.
She's she's one of these women that is the number of them is growing that are pushing into 35, 40 range and still amazing. I actually got a little bit lucky to see her compete at one event in Wadapalooza. Because we were like breaking down from one stage and getting ready to move to another stage or something like that. And she just happened to be competing and I'm like, my goodness, man, like everything that she's been through and she still has it. Like she still has it. I just don't see her not being in the middle of this field that, like I think she's going to beat half the field and I don't know how or why, but that's how good she is.
I agree with that. I put her so high too, because she has like the home turf advantage, if you will. Really familiar with Mayhem programming and what they do there. And like you said, she won first in her age group. Like she is so incredibly fit still. So I think she's going to give everybody a run for their money.
We do have some Claudia Gluck fans in the comments, but she's flying all the way from France. I believe she's en route now. I think her, Fabio and Benito, from looking at their stories, they're in flight. Facundo is on his way too. For those that don't know Facundo is, he'll probably be a major feature of the Mayhem Classic and probably in coaching quite a few of the athletes. But Claudia Gluck, you have at 8, Brian, and you have her at 10th, Cait. I mean, Cait? Is that just because you're a little bit unfamiliar with her, minus her being a games athlete? I know Brian has seen her many a times live, and she seems to be trending in the right direction, especially as a European athlete.
Yeah, again, just a little unfamiliar. She has a really good track record. She got 61st in the Open this year. She got 6th last year at semifinals. So obviously a really good athlete and in person as well. Just like I said, a little bit unfamiliar as opposed to the rest.
I'm just docking all the people who are traveling internationally for this event relative to their top end potential. Like if this event was in France and all of these women from the US were traveling to France, I would have Claudia in the top 5. Similarly, if it was in Spain, I would move Fabian up and Manon up. If Royce Dunn's actually coming here, I don't think he's the worst or least fit guy in the field, but I do think that travel is a beast compared to a lot of athletes who are within driving distance or live in Mayhem, especially on the men's side.
Yeah, I really like Claudia. I really don't think the travel is going to do that. I mean, obviously traveling from Europe to the U.S. is not that bad. I mean, especially those leaving today on a Monday, them competing on Friday, I believe Friday. It should give them plenty of time, ample time to adjust and get into a sleep pattern. I think to Nashville. I mean, I don't think there's any direct flights to Nashville from Europe. but there's probably some connection. So it's a long travel day. So yeah, I can kind of see that as well. But I mean, Claudia, I think she'll do well with Mayhem programming.
Think about Karen Frey.
Yeah.
How often have we seen her just crush competition in Europe, and what's her track record in the US? And she's had a chance to do it many, many times. So I mean, you can't ignore it. And I, when the field's kind of really, really tight like this, I'm going to look for stuff like that as the margins of error that will make a difference by potentially a few points on the leaderboard. But it's not just the sleep stuff. It's a different nutrition. It's like getting the correct supplements, making sure you have things available. And athletes are in general getting better about this. But it's just challenges that a lot of this field in particular doesn't have to think about, and a few of them do.
Yeah. This brings me to, I want to talk about this person here. It's the athlete with the biggest discrepancy between the two. But I want to talk about Lindsay Lane first. First and foremost, I think it's awesome that Lindsay Lane got an invite to this competition, because obviously she would have made the syndicate crown, but because she's associated with JR and the programming and testing of the workouts at Syndicate Crown, she did not receive an invite to Syndicate Crown. So I think this is really cool, really good on Mayhem to extend an invite for her to compete in this field. To give her a chance to compete in the semifinals. You have her at 9, Cait, and Brian, you have her at 16th. Why so high, Cait?
Guys, some of my picks are really just
you like the name?
From the gut, I don't know anything about her, but she finished 45th in the Open this year. So that is really the only thing I'm going off of. Again, kind of a wild card. But because of her Open finish, I said, why not? Let's try to give her a top 10. No facts at all other than that.
Well, Brian has some information on her that, that's kind of why you're on here, kind of analyst in training. But, Brian, what can you tell us about Lindsay Lane?
Lindsay, I think, is still improving. I think she's good. We'll see some potentially good events, maybe 1 or 2 good events from her. But like you're talking about with the tiers, like after Emily Rolfe, I starts a tier 2 for me, which goes basically from Claudia to Hannah Black, and then the bottom 5 women there. I just think that for either where they're at with their fitness, their life, or both, that they're not in the same caliber as the rest of this field. Lindsay's like she is good on the like Draw Your Dag is saying, she's good on the range of motion stuff, the skills stuff. I don't know how much high skill stuff there's going to be here. When she won in Crash Crucible, like, it was a perfect competition for her. And she's obviously trains with JR all the time. So there's some specific implements that are common to his programming that she probably trains in a frequency that's higher than most of the people that are traveling in for that. So I think I agree with Patrick that it's great to have her in the field for the reasons that he said, but I see it difficult for her to get out of the bottom 5 here.
I don't mind to pick Cait. I mean, usually in competitions, you usually have that one athlete kind of steps up. Lindsay had a lot of high level competition, and she's actually competed against, last year when they did Kill Taylor or was it quarterfinals. She went head to head with Fee and held her own, and so she's used to competing against. I mean, she's not going to be jaded. I don't think many of these athletes here in this field are going to be jaded. All of them competed high level. They've competed against each other one way or the other. A lot of familiarity, but I think Lindsay Lane, I don't mind to pick at all. I mean, there's always going to be that one athlete that kind of squeezes through, and she might. Who knows if things line up? Like Draw Your Dagger said, the more skills involved, the better she'll do because she is a high skilled athlete.
The thing about JR's competitions is that they test very specific things. Like, there are tests for grip, there are tests for skills, there are tests for odd objects, there are tests for aerobic capacity, tests for strength. I think we're going to see more well-rounded workouts in Mayhem. From Heavy Isabel is what it is because it seems like that's just a decision that was made uniformly across a bunch of competitions. But already you see in the other workout they've announced where you got to run, you got to be able to get up and down over that box, and you got to squat. And the only way you're going to do really well at that is if you're the fittest person. There's not really a place to gain a significant advantage. And so I think besides Heavy Isabel, you might see one other workout that kind of offsets that, where if you're great on your hands or great on a pegboard or something like that, you can excel. But I expect 4 of these 6 tests to be more along the lines of the running, burpee get over, and squatting one, where it's just the fittest people that are going to do well.
Let's move on to Manon. Again, another European athlete. You're one spot apart. I imagine this pick here is just based on, Manon to travel as well, and also just based off of her. She hasn't really done many live competitions recently. She missed out on the games last year, so.
I mean, I don't have too much to add with Manon compared to Claudia Gluck. I view them as, kind of relatively similar, meaning like if you were to throw them into the competitive field in Europe, they're both going to be flirting with the top 5 if they have a great weekend. Manon generally has made her name basically through the rogue qualifiers and then doing great at the rogue events. Claudia's had more success in Dubai Fitness Championship, for example, where she's chosen to compete. She did have a decent showing at the games last year, considering all the factors involved there. So I think they're pretty similar in terms of their potential here. And again, if it was in Europe, I would probably move them up, 3 to 5 spots each.
I feel the same. I originally had her a couple spots higher, and then looking at just the strength of the field, I bumped her down a little bit. Just like what Brian said, I think if it was in Europe or something, she'd definitely be higher up on the list. But I mean, I still don't think 11th is great considering who else is in the field. So just kind of where she landed.
I do want to talk about kind of like what we talked about Lindsay Lane with you. Brian kind of has his Lindsay Lane, and that's Nina Rogovic. He has her at 11th. You have her at 16th. She's an athlete that we've been keeping an eye on for a couple of years now. Hasn't really had that breakthrough yet, but Brian, you think that she's going to hold her own in this tier of athletes? You have her finishing ahead of someone like Caroline Stanley, who Caroline Stanley finished ahead of her pretty handily at Syndicate, has qualified for the games multiple times as well.
Yeah, I would think that this is probably you have identified it well. This is kind of the pick that I'm making here. And I feel like Nina's time is sort of now or never. Like, she's got to make a breakthrough. She's got to make a jump up. She just finished mid-pack in Wadapalooza. She didn't, the performances weren't bad. It's just a big field. And I want to see her kind of back that up by a middle pack finish here against a more competitive field. It's less people, a little bit higher level. And, if she wants to make that next stage, and she has an opportunity with the people that she trains with all the time to do it at home in what should be somewhat favorable programming for her, I think it's got to be that stepping stone in her career. So I'm hopeful that it will be. And that's where the pick's coming from. I don't know that she has competition performance that would warrant a pick ahead of Caroline or Hannah. See some of that potential there, and let's see.
Cait, how much does being a Mayhem athlete, how much of that do you factor in when you make your selections here?
I look at their competition experience first, and then if they're if somebody is kind of on the line for me, like we talked about with Haley Adams, bumping her in front of somebody else when we're talking about maybe a top 5 finish, I think it matters. But as we get lower down the list, I think it matters a little bit less, and I value their experience more. Like we're talking about now, she has never been to the games in a field with most of the women who have been to the games, and I think there is an upper hand if you have some games experience as opposed to not.
Well, one of these athletes, I think some of the people in the comments are talking about is Caroline Stanley. Both have them pretty low. I mean, she's a multiple games athlete. She doesn't compete much during the off season. We hardly ever see her. I think it's a lot because she has a full-time job. I believe she works at a vet, or she, and also does various farm chores. But what do you guys have her, obviously outside the top 10? Is there something there, Brian, you're just not seeing from her to be, to kind of be down this low?
No, I mean, I view this very similarly to kind of like we've been talking about, sort of a semifinal or a qualifier field. And they are missing some big names from the East Coast, but we've supplemented them with some good international athletes and good West Coast women. And, her range of finishes in semifinals is 9 to 12. So I think that she's likely going to be kind of in that similar vicinity.
Okay. Cait?
I mean, yeah, I agree with him. There's some people that I think are going to do better than her, given her finishes. Still not bad.
One of the people you have doing better than her is Christine Kohlenbrander. You have her at 12th. I know you're a big Christine Kohlenbrander fan. Brian, you have her there. I mean, second to last. Didn't really make any adjustment. I think she was 19th. You just shipped everything up. I think both you guys are making your choices based on where she is. We don't know where she is in terms of her fitness. I think that she's fine. I think she's healthy, and I think her fitness is fine. She obviously still works out. She's obviously still pretty fit. She wouldn't take an invite unless she thinks she can compete. Maybe she's not competing for a games invite, but she's still there to compete. Was that kind of what you had in mind, Cait, or were you basing your pick on something else?
No, I know she took last year off. She is kind of one of my hopefuls. I do think 17th to pick for Brian.
Mm-hmm.
It's also kind of crazy. But I don't think she's a 17th athlete, but maybe 12th is a little too hopeful as well. But I do just really like her, and traditionally she's done decent in in-person competition. So hoping, I'm not really sure where she's at now. She placed 768 in the Open. I know that doesn't mean much, but we'll kind of see what happens when she gets there.
Brian, is that kind of what you're basing it? Just the unknown where she is, or just knowing that maybe fitness isn't a priority with her right now?
Yeah, both of those things certainly factored in. I did see a comment about, the likelihood of her doing very well on Heavy Isabel. Someone had said she was going to win that. I don't think she's going to win it, but I do think that will be likely her best finish of the competition. And when, if you're able to get a top 3 finish on that, it will keep you out at the bottom 2. So I could have used Brooke and DB's withdraw as like a excuse to move her up the rankings, but I wanted to stick by my guns, so I wasn't going to make any changes based on that. But I think Cait's assessment is good. Maybe 15th, 14th out of 18 would be a little bit more sensible, knowing that she's likely to have a really good finish on one of the 2 known events.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned one of those athletes that you're referring to, like Christine doing really well in an event, but let's talk about an athlete who I think is kind of very similar, maybe younger and kind of relatively new to the scene. Let's talk about Hannah Black, who probably most of us are expecting to win Heavy Isabel. You both have pretty much 2 spots away from each other. What can we expect out of Hannah Black? This is someone who kind of burst on the scene a couple of years ago, semifinals, has tried her luck at tried an individual, went team last year, made it to the games on a team. You got to see her at Dubai in an individual competition, Brian. Are you seeing an individual athlete in her, the potential, or do you see someone that's more of a team athlete, fringe semifinal, fringe games athlete?
Haven't completely made up my mind on that yet. She was one of the athletes I kind of tinkered with a bit in these. I thought about putting her as high as 10. I thought about maybe dropping her even 1 or maybe probably not any lower than this. Like I said, she's at the back of kind of that middle tier for me. Super strong. Think she's in a good training environment. Think that she's, improving on the things that she wants to improve on. I just don't think there's going to be many places to hide in this one. And I think that there's a lot of pretty fit and well-rounded athletes in the field. So she'll have to, she got 10th in Dubai, but I think that this field's a little stronger than that. So I have her just outside the top 10.
Cait, anything to add?
No, I agree with what Brian said. Obviously, she's exceptional at lifting, so I'm excited to see that. But I'm just not really sure how she is as an individual athlete, so that's why I put her down in the bottom 5 now.
There's a name on there that might not be familiar to some people. It's Kira Miller, formerly Kira Napoli. You both have her at 14th, ahead of some really, some proven games athletes like, Victoria Campos, Christine Colbrand. Now they're different reasons, but tell me more about Kira Napoli / Kira Miller.
She's, I would say, yeah. Besides, even if she'd had the kind of normal name that we were used to seeing her on leaderboards with, she's maybe the surprise athlete to be included in this field. She's been just kind of like stagnant over the last 3 seasons, where there hasn't been much improvement at the semifinal level. Like, she's good enough to get there every year, but she hasn't made that jump to like be on the radar of threatening for a game spot. She's in that 15 to 25 range, kind of flitting back and forth. And I think that range yields you a bottom 5 finish here.
Agreed again with him. I don't really know anything about her, but looking at her open finishes and semifinal finishes, she's kind of in that same bubble with the rest of the people that I have at the bottom 5.
Well, there's only 2 other names we haven't really talked to. We mentioned Victoria Campos. Campos, obviously has been representing Brazil at the games for many years. She does a lot of live competition. Normally doesn't do, you never see, like, she always does good in Brazil. But whenever it's a competition in the U.S. or in Dubai or something like that, or another country, she's usually top 10, 15. So you have her at 15th, Brian. You have her at 17th. I'm sure that's part of the reason why you have her so low, and not knowing the extent of her fitness. She is not doing the game season this year, but did get an invite to Mayhem. She does, I believe, she still does live in Cookeville, right, Brian? As far as last time I checked.
At least some of the time, yeah. And she's definitely a part of the Mayhem family.
Yeah.
She's had some great performances. She's competed at some competitions where she hasn't done as well. I don't know. I think it's just pretty similar amongst this group of athletes here. Is maybe they'll surprise us, but it seems kind of straightforward that these are just likely going to be the bottom third of this field.
Yeah. Agreed.
And then finally, Paige Powers. She left a comment for you, Brian.
I saw that
comment section. She basically said this is one of the first times that she'll agree with your pick.
She said it's the only time she'll allow me to pick her last.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, everyone knows that Paige is just coming off having a beautiful, I believe, a son, and she's just kind of working herself into it. I think it's great that for Rich and them to kind of open this up for her, kind of get her back into the competition and training, and because obviously she was one of those athletes who was trending up, after coming off, after winning Wadapalooza, still not even 20 years old yet, and here she is, I believe she's 21, going on 22 now. Still a lot of potential in her. Maybe that mom strength will translate to the younger athletes that have kids. I don't know. But it certainly has helped with some of the older athletes. I mean, for example, someone like Andrea Nisler, and then you got Ariel, and various athletes out there. But anything you guys want? What is your expectation in Paige? Are you seeing all bottom half finishes throughout the whole weekend? You just seeing her out there just having fun? What would you like to see, and what is your expectations of it?
I definitely think she's not going to have any standout performances, but understandably so. I don't know if any of us would expect that of her. I can't remember. She's only 6 or 8 weeks postpartum or something. She's still very new getting back into it, but I think it is so cool to put yourself in that kind of environment against all of these really good athletes, people who we're talking about who are going to could possibly win the CrossFit Games, and she's not afraid to get out there, even though she's definitely not at 100%. I think that's really cool that she's doing it, and it shows people who are going through something very similar that you can still go out there and have fun.
Brian, anything you wanted to say about Paige?
I think Cait said it beautifully. I hope that she has a good time doing it. I hope that she makes smart decisions for her body and just, enjoys competition. It's a big topic of conversation for athletes in this sport, and particularly women, 17 to 25 year age range, is, figuring out how to find that competitive life balance. And she, I think she'll be able to do that this week, but also hopefully maybe set an example for other women that are looking at, someone like her.
So basically, that's the women's field. Again, we had basically looks like 6 athletes essentially where there's some discrepancy, but across the board, it looks pretty solid. Both your picks. Looks like Lindsay Lane's the big pick for you, Cait, and then on Brian's side is Nina. So it'll be interesting to see. I have no idea, how this is going to end up. But I do think, like Brian says, there's the top 5 athletes should be fun to watch, especially now DB and Brooke have kind of have withdrawn. It would have made it a little bit more exciting, of course, but that seems to be the main topic is those two withdrawing. But it creates another opportunity for someone like Abigail for you, Cait, and Paige for Brian to punch their ticket a lot earlier than anyone else for the games. So we'll move over to the men's side here, and as of 1 second ago, we still have the full men's field.
What are you looking at?
my watch that I don't have on right now. But as of now, there's been no changes to the men's field. There really hasn't been too many changes to the men's field compared to the women's field since the announcement. But I think what we could comfortably probably talk about is a top 5 and how that top 5 mixes up. And that top 5, in no particular order, but you guys are pretty close: Austin Hatfield, James Sprague, Roman, Jason Hopper, and Colton Mertens. You guys agreed those are the top 5 athletes. How close of a race are we going to see between those 5 athletes?
I think it's difficult to say with this particular group of athletes, not knowing the programming, how close it's going to be, because you have 2 totally different body types and skill sets between James and Colton. I mean, between Austin and Colton, and James, Jason, and Roman. Additionally, you have Roman that's just an entirely unknown entity. Like, he has not competed since the games. The last time we saw him compete, unbeknownst to most people, he wasn't competing healthy. Apparently, he wasn't even in perfect condition at the semifinals.
Yes.
And while it's so interesting, I was thinking about this morning because I've already talked about it with some of the women, and certainly we can say this for some of the men, that being as old as Roman is, which is basically right around 30, is not a death sentence in the sport. Like, you can thrive in your 30s. But when you think about guys like him and Ricky that are their ceiling is so high, but their propensity for having something pop up physically that precludes them from doing their perfect or their optimal performance, you can't ignore that. There's just some athletes in sport that can't shake the injury bug for whatever reason. And, I could like Roman could win this, but he might not, I don't even know if he's healthy for sure. Like, I can't get a clear answer on that. I just see, he posts, and even in the times that he was at his healthiest, you would see like more of these posts from him that are like, I'm coming, I'm ready. It's 10 months, 6 weeks, like just these like two liners, 2 worders that were kind of intimidating to his opposition. I don't think he has that intimidation factor anymore, because a lot of these guys have beaten him. They know that he's, not necessarily as healthy as they are in competition. And the margin for at the top of the men's field right now is like nothing. Like, these guys are all so freaking good. So I think Roman's the biggest wild card, but the programming is definitely going to matter. I mean, if there's some kind of 2-part workout that comes out in these tight time domains that's similar to the 2-parter finale at the games, if Austin and Colton can just take 195 out of 200 points from these guys, like, that's going to be brutal. But on the flip side of that, if you see the heavy sandbags, flip sleds and a heavy barbell for reps, like squat cleans at 315 or something, that's a lot of good stuff for the big boys. So I think that to have a really, really accurate assessment of how these 5 guys are going to do, you actually do need to see the programming a little bit. But I think that it's quite clear that these are the top 5 guys in this competition.
Cait?
Yeah, I think it is going to be really close. I do think it's going to depend on the programming, though. Like Brian said, Roman is kind of a wild card. Like, I want to put him higher than what I do, but you just never know what you're going to get. I do, Patrick, I think we talked about this on one of the podcasts previously, but I don't know if we've kind of seen all we're going to get from him. That's kind of the feeling I have, but I keep waiting for something else to happen. But it doesn't seem like he can get rid of, injuries or whatever else is going on. So I think it's going to be really fun. I think Austin Hatfield kind of makes things a little bit more spicier now that he's in the mix. So I'm really excited to see what we're going to see from him.
I think what we were talking to, and Brian alluded to this, is kind of like these athletes' windows, especially these athletes like Ricky and Roman, who are getting older, and their windows are shrinking for them to succeed and to win in the sport. And I don't think it's because of their age. I think it's because all these athletes are getting better. You're seeing huge jumps. No one, I don't think at the time, no one could predict that jump that James Sprague took, or even 2 years ago, the jump that Dallin Pepper had. Yeah. Or, I mean, me and Brian have been waiting for this version of Jason Hopper for 3 seasons now. But I think that's the reason why these windows for someone like Roman and Ricky, and, you know, it's kind of closing a little bit. But he is still really good. We just, like you said, both said, he's the X factor here. I want to, Brian, you've seen this matchup in person, and this is something I know Colton's been waiting for, because, you know, Colton, he loves taking on like the hot new thing. Austin Hatfield is the hot new thing. Austin Hatfield has a win over Colton in competition over the last 2 years at Crash Crucible. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
But they have yet to compete head-to-head or in the same competition since then. You know, Colton went out west, competed at West Coast. Austin was here at There of them competed at Austin competed at Wodapalooza. Colton did not. So this is an opportunity for both of them to kind of just measure each other up. It's been almost 2 years since they've competed against each other. So I think I'm really interested to see that matchup. Cait, Brian, what is that something you're interested in, that storyline? There's so many storylines in that top 5 to begin with, but that's a storyline that I'm looking at. Where do you guys think that storyline falls in line when it comes to the whole competition on the men's side?
I think it's fun to compare them because they are a similar body size or body types, if you will. But Austin just came out of nowhere, at least to me. So that's why, you know, Colton's been around for a really long time and he's had some ups and downs, but Austin just seems like he came into the picture and really quickly doing really well. I would, I guess, call him an underdog last year and like proved everybody wrong. And it seems like he just keeps getting better. I will, because they are so similar.
Actually, he proved John Young exactly right.
Yeah, John Young had him right. I'll give John his flowers on that.
I think that's where I originally heard his name from. But I think it'll be interesting to see, because they are similar athletes, if you will, how they compare against each other all weekend. Colton's great. I just like have a really good feeling about Austin Hatfield in that first place, like Brian, but close in second.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you like about these two guys is that, like, they have no fear. They have no fear in front of the camera. They have no fear of calling someone out. They don't really care who you are or what you say about them. They're the type of people that turn the blinders off and go to work on a daily basis so that they can show up and make people eat their words. And they remind me of George Sterner and what I said about him 7 years ago. They remind me of Matt Fraser when he was in the depths of his dominance, is in terms of the mindset, in terms of the mentality of just like, there's no excuses. They're not taking any shit from anyone. They're not just because anyone or anything suggests that they can't do it. That doesn't mean anything to them. If anything, that's motivating for them. I think in terms of the difference that I have of their placements on the leaderboard, look, we would be remiss to not acknowledge, I think it was this comment here from Jake a while ago, Colton's performance in the last month on the online qualifiers for the Open and World Fitness Project are extremely impressive. They cannot be ignored. And, you know, it leaves me wondering one thing, is that dominance that he just showed something that's possible to parlay into a similar performance in live competition? Because he's never had that level of dominance in live competition against this caliber of field. And he previously had not had that level of dominance in an online competition. He's won events, but first, second, and then, you know, whatever, we'll wait to see what happens with the WFP reviews against the worldwide population. And like, look, I know there's athletes that aren't doing the game season, but you tell me the athlete that's not doing the game season that would have beat him on any of those workouts with the times that he put up. So is it possible that he's made a significant enough jump to actually challenge guys like James and Jason and Roman and even Austin, who in 1 year at the games has a better performance and similar accolades already in terms of event wins and top 5 finishes to Colton over multiple years at the games? I don't know. And so I'm giving Colton credit here based on his online performance against 15 of these guys, but he still has to earn that, like the right to be placed ahead of guys like that have podiumed at major competitions. And that I think like Austin Hatfield's a little bit of an exception compared to his achievements compared to the other guys. I just see the potential that John saw last year. Anyway, so I feel like Colton's has gotten better. I just don't know how much yet.
That's what I like about this competition is he's so hot right now, and so is Austin Hatfield. So is Hopper and Sprague. I mean, we're looking at, four. I forgot where Roman finished in the Open, but we're looking at 4 of the top 5 guys in the Open, top 10.
Roman
athletes.
ended up 7 or 8, yeah, and then
so we're looking at basically the top athletes transferring. So this is almost like a quarterfinal for them, because of for 3 of these guys, they're going to have to do the online qualifier, online semifinal, or another semifinal to get their games ticket. So. Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points about Colton because Colton's live performances have not been anything like Austin. So this is a year. This is the competition for Colton to kind of, if Colton can perform and better yet win this competition, I think he definitely shuts a lot of people up, and that's what he's been doing. He's kind of been on a mission of doing since he was.
Yeah, but let's also just not forget what happened to Yonakoski last year. He won the Open. He won the quarters. He didn't even make the games. So, I don't know. I didn't remember where John ended up bumping Colton onto the mountain, but Colton has not done anything in live competition that's close to what he just did in the Open. And doing that in the Open, yes, we've seen dominating performances like that. Mal O'Brien, Sarah Sigmundsdottir, Matt Fraser, that have translated Tia Kotumi, that have translated to live competition. He hasn't made that jump yet. He hasn't proven to me that against a field like this, 6 events in person over 2 days. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying do it. And then things really start to change.
Cait, anything else you want to say about the top 5 athletes here?
I don't think so. I think maybe a lot of people are going to pick James Sprague just because of his recent performances at the games and at Wodapalooza. I think he's
don't discount his semifinal either. The men's West Coast semifinal, it was a pretty legit field, and he podiumed there also. You're
right. You're correct. He is good. I don't know. I think Austin Hatfield is doing really cool stuff. I think Jason Hopper, is only getting better, improving that, and I think he's also hungry. And that's the really cool thing about, I'll say the top 5 minus Roman is that they all seem really hungry to win and excel. So I think it's going to be a dogfight to see who punches the tickets.
Yeah, Brian, anything else you want to say about the top 5 before we move on?
I guess I would just say I think they all have a chance to take one of those top 2 spots. I think the guys that are in there for me or for Cait, if they're seeing this and they care about what we think, they should actually be motivated to validate those picks, and the other guys should be pissed, and they should want to come in and take it and say, shut the fuck up, Brian. That's what I expect from these guys. That's the type of athletes that they are. That's the type of personalities that they have. And that's part of the reason that they're so good.
I'm going to let Scott from Clydesdale have the final word on the top 5 here. I think it's especially Colton. Now, Scott is he's a big Colton fan. He's been talking about Colton for about 3 years now. He's a big fan of his, but he brings up a good point. Colton has been impressive, but did a lot of repeats in the Open. You only get one shot at this. So Colton's really showed himself out in the Open qualifier or these online qualifiers when you have multiple chances.
That's super relevant when you think back to last year's semifinal, because what happened to him on the final event, it was about the worst possible finish he's ever going to have on that event. Mm-hmm. He could do that event 10 times over and he'll make the games each of those other 10 times. So it's not just a matter of fitness. It's a matter of execution under pressure. And it makes this comment even more relevant.
Yeah. So great. I mean, way to bring that up, Scott. I wanted to kind of give you some props on that. And then CJ, we'll talk about some of these guys, but my top 5, based solely on preference, Fabi, Gee, Nick Matthews, Sterner, and maybe Farlow. That's why he doesn't gamble.
Crazy.
There's a phone number you can call if you do gamble. So Okay, so we go get it past the top five.
By the way, never gamble with Lynn. She proposed a bet to me of Brooke Wells versus Shelby Neal this morning, and before I could even agree to it, Brooke Wells withdrew. She was trying to win a bet against me before it even started.
Oh, sorry, I'm corrected. Sorry, yeah, my bad, CJ. All right, so here Brian brought up his name earlier, and it seems like a lot of people are kind of, I don't know, maybe sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit on him. I'm a big fan of his, but you have George Sterner at 6. Brian, you have him at 9th. Is George Sterner to Austin Hatfield for this year?
I'm going to start by saying I am the most unfamiliar with the men's field. I've heard a lot of people talk about him, which is honestly why I bumped him up a little bit. That's all I have to say, honestly. So
you're a big fan of his gardening or something. So.
George is super talented. I actually had a chance to see him in person about a week ago and talk to him a little bit. Yeah, he had a nice reemergence into the competitive field with his top 5 finish in the online qualifier and 15th place finish at Wodapalooza. And I mean, look, he beat Moritz, Luke Parker, Luca. Those are probably the biggest names that he beat there. But a lot of these guys that are in this list beat him at Wodapalooza as well. And I don't know. I just think he's lacking the thing that has been the biggest weakness for him, because he hasn't been training with the same purpose as these guys, which is the top end strength. So I think that there will be half the events that he'll do pretty well on. I think he'll probably take a hit on Heavy Isabel out of the gate. And if I'm expecting another event that's pretty heavy. It's not a 1-rep max, but that's pretty heavy. And if that's the case, I think that he'll take a hit on that too. And he'll end up kind of in the middle. Again, you talk about sort of the groupings or the tiers here. And I sort of put him in the middle of a group of guys that I view as the middle tier of this competition.
Yeah, let's talk about that middle tier. I'm assuming that goes from Spencer Panchik to maybe Guy or.
I mean, it's pretty. Yeah.
I mean, actually, that can go all the way to Jack Rosema. It seems like.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack Rosema, quite frankly, I would have had him in the top 10, but I don't think he's been training like these guys have been training. He self-advertised that I'm trying to cram a bunch of fitness into 2 weeks to get ready for this competition, and I don't think that recipe is going to work against this group of guys. That's the only reason why he's down here. It's not in a slight at him by any means, based on what he did last year and what we know he's capable of. I mean, he was in that mix with Austin and Colton at Crucible a couple years ago. He was, right in the mix with Austin in the semifinal last year. But I just think that, again, he's got some stuff outside of life outside of competition in his life that gives him these kind of ups and downs. And I don't think you can get away with that in a competition like this against this group of guys.
I can definitely relate with Jack, because obviously him being full-time military, being a military lawyer, having wife, kids, it's hard to find that time to train at that intensity for competition. So I know that all too well. I do like the pick at 7 for him, Cait. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm a big Jack fan. I think he's, Jack, the version of Jack we saw Syndicate was like an impressive Jack. I mean, he beat Austin. He's very impressive. But
just to be clear, I had him 9th before learning about that.
Learning all that stuff, yeah, which is it's fair enough. Spencer Panchik is 6. You got a little bit of heat about that in the comments on the post, and you backed it up.
I was confused about why people were so surprised by that. I mean, I would say, it's like a little bit of a stretch, but Spencer's still really good. 7th and 10th in the last 2 major events that he's done. And, I think that, those, to me, definitely the top 4, probably the top 5 are a different conversation. But I don't see any reason why Spencer can't beat everyone else on this list in a 6-event competition. I think that he's going to have probably 2 events that favor his skill set pretty well. And we'll see. I don't necessarily disagree with people thinking it's a little too high, like Craig's saying there, but I kind of have a good feeling about him this weekend, and sometimes it's fun to do.
Well, Well, let's talk about 6 through 10. Those athletes there. We already talked about George. We talked about Spencer. We talked about Jack. Any other athletes, that you think that fall in that range? I mean, I know both of you have Jorge and Nick Matthew kind of in the same group together. Yeah, let's talk. I mean, one of you want Brian? Why don't you talk about Jorge, and then Cait, I'll have you talk about Nick Matthew.
Jorge Fernandez to me it's like similarly to how I'm assessing Nina here. Like this is the time. We have seen these glimpses, we have seen these one-off events, but come on, Jorge, like if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna like make a statement about how good you've become, it's got to be this weekend. So I'm sort of hedging on that bet, and I put him up here towards the top of this middle group of athletes. Hoping that that's the case. I believe he has that potential. I don't think he's really strung together a perfect individual competition. He's done Rogue, he's done Dubai, and so I think now's the time for him. He is a little bit older compared to when he started really pursuing the individual side of competition, but that means that he's got a lot of training age underneath him. So, yeah, I mean, Jorge is a great person, a great guy. Love talking to him, love seeing him compete, and I'm hopefully can put together a complete competition this weekend.
Okay, what do you have to say about Nick Matthew?
We both picked him 10th, which I think is a really good place for him, right in the middle. From what I've seen, he has really great seasons and not so great, which is kind of why I just put him in the middle, because I'm really not sure what we may see. Finished 51st in the Open, again, like not putting too much in that basket, but I think 10th is good considering like who's at the top and who's at the bottom. Definitely not a top 5 athlete, but I think to put him any lower, especially like bottom 5, would be not giving him enough credit.
A name you had really high on here, who I'm high on too. You had him at 8 is Seth Stovall. You had him at 16, so 8 spots below him. I mean, Brian, I imagine Cait's probably just maybe lack of knowing that much about Seth. I mean, he kind of burst on the scene last year at semifinals, was basically a few points away from making the games. Brian, me and you've had discussions about that. Seth is someone that I wish would compete more in the offseason. I know there's factors of reason why he does that. But, yeah, you have him at 8. Why at 8? Do you see more at the top of that tier? Is this something where you think he's going to build on semifinal a year ago, or are we going to see a regression?
Yeah, build on semifinal a year ago. The kid's 23 years old, I think, and he's 2 top 20 finishes in the last 2 years in the North America East semifinal, which is the most difficult semifinal depth-wise in the world. Look, anyone who's looking at Seth Stovall and raising their eyebrows, where would you put Taylor Self if he was in this field and could squat? Because Seth beat him at semifinals last year. He barely lost to Luke Parker and missed out on a game spot. Like, he's young. He's got a ton of training experience. He's doing this competition from home. And I think if he sticks with it long enough, he will eventually register on people's radars. And he's got a good chance to make a good showing this weekend.
Cait, was that assessment of why you have him so low? Is that kind of spot on, or is it just or is there something else that you've heard or seen?
No, honestly, my bottom top 5, 3 of them have no games experience, and he was one of those. So that's why he kind of ended up lower on my list. That was it.
But
he is working, but he's been working, and he's still finding ways to get in it. I would say he has a similar mindset to Colton of like, I'm not going to use the fact that I'm working 1 or 2 jobs as an excuse. If I have to go in at 4 a.m. or 10 p.m. or in between shifts or whatever, I'm going to do it. And, he's had his challenges of like questioning, is it worth it? How long do I invest in this? But he's still going after it. And I think that that's commendable.
Cait, I'm going to let you talk about Luke Parker here.
Let's see. I put him 13th. I just feel like he's always in the middle of the pack. I know he's a Mayhem athlete too, so I think I actually bumped him a little bit higher because of that. But he's always just there in the middle. I don't really think he ever has any standout performances or anything he can really, we can bet on him for. He's always there and he does a good job, but definitely don't see him in the top 10.
Brian, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, I took a gamble on Luke with my rating at Wadapalooza when I thought that the workouts were really, really good for him, and it didn't pay off. So right back to where we're used to seeing him in terms of my projections.
Brian, I'm going to let you talk about Guy here. I mean, you've obviously had a lot of conversations with him about where he is, what he's doing, what his intention is with the season. Yeah, go ahead and inform us about Guy.
Probably when I look at this now, it's the pick that I regret the most. I wanted to put him higher. I think that he'll take a hit on that running workout. I think he'll win Isabel, and I think that he's probably going to see. I'm curious if we're going to see another workout that's over 15 minutes. If we do, then I feel a little bit better about this, but I have a feeling there's still at least 2 events to come that he's going to do quite well on, and he's got a history of finishing in the top 10 at Wodapalooza and at Rogue and at the games. Like, there's really no field that he's shown that he can't finish in the top end. It doesn't mean he does it every time, but he's got that potential. So this is probably the low end of where his range would be, and part of me wishes I'd put him 2 or 3 spots higher.
Kate, do you feel the same?
He's one of those people that I usually do put a little bit higher, and I feel like it kind of bites is right in the middle. I think he could have a home turf advantage again. I do think it depends a lot on what the programming looks like, but I don't think that it's going to be more than 1 or 2 spots, if any.
Yeah, I call this tier kind of like, I know there's a couple tiers here, Brian, but this tier I look at as like the Mayhem tier. It's all the games athletes from that live in Cookeville or spend a lot of time in Cookeville. I mean, we have Alex Vigneault, we mentioned Luke Parker, we mentioned Guy, we mentioned Seth. We'll talk about Royce Dunn and Augustin as well. But let's talk about Alex Vigneault. He's a guy, we talked about people working full time. He's a full time cop, and his brother Jeremy. They both, I think he's in law enforcement as well. Alex Vigneault, he didn't really. I forgot where he finished last year in the semifinals, but he's
16th,
kind of just
one spot
16th.
ahead of Farlow.
Yeah, so but he's also a guy that kind of like was trending the right direction in the games, and then kind of disappeared. Got a full-time job. Then he kind of came back on once he realized, hey, I can train and balance. He found a work-life balance. Do you think Alex Vigneault's window as a games athlete is closed, or do you think there's still a possibility he can make it to the games?
That depends on how badly he wants to make it to the games, and probably also the qualifying format. If I had to make a bet right now, I would say he will not qualify for the games as an individual again in his career. I really had a hard time with the Canadians here. I mean, for different reasons. I'm just going to say it. Like, Jack Farlow is one of the few athletes that I feel like I have absolutely no pulse on what we're going to get from him at a competition when he shows up to it. And it seems like I always get it wrong. So, do whatever you will with that. I've told you guys before, I usually get about 75% of the picks wrong, and he seems to always be in that 25%, no matter if I pick him high or low. But Sam and Alex they're not training. I think similar to Jack Rosema, their potential is super high if they want it to be, but I don't think that they're training with the same ferocity and intention as most of the guys that are ahead of them. I actually talked to Sam a little bit since these picks came out, and he said, I told him, I was like, I'm excited to see because I don't really know. And he goes, I feel like the exact same way. So that was kind of a fun conversation with him. And I think similar with Alex. So yeah, the Canadian guys were tough for me, and I have them all down here in a similar range. You see them right next to each other. All of them have top 10 potential, but everyone else who's ahead of this, I know what their purpose is this year. And these guys, it's a little uncertain. I mean, Jack had kind of hedged his bet on the WFP, and it doesn't look like he's in a great spot on the qualifier. So maybe this competition has a little bit more meaning and value to him now. I'm not really sure. So I just lumped the Canadian guys in here because I wasn't certain.
Yeah. It's funny because it seems like 2 years ago, me and you were both 3 years ago, me and you, both of us are really high on Samuel. And we thought him going team was going to be kind of like that was going to like help him out as an individual athlete. And, just the uncertainty of his season this year and him deciding flip-flopping between competing. I mean, I know he's done some high rocks. I mean, he's obviously very fit. It's just more of a, where is he in his life and what his intention is. Kind of the same thing with Jack as well. Cait, is there, are you looking forward to seeing Guy and Jack Farlow, competing probably head to head in some form or fashion in Isabel? And I know you really like the big lifts.
Yeah.
We have yet to see like Guy and Jack Farlow kind of go one-on-one like that. I mean, how are you excited for that?
I think it's always exciting, when you have one heavy hitter, we'll just say Guy, that he's going to have a home run with an event, but to have two people that are very similar that can go head to head like that and not, they're actually competing against somebody. I think that's going to be really exciting to kind of have them give each other a run for their money and not just have that one standout person.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we also still have Austin Hatfield, Hopper, Colton, and even Royce Dunn, famously, went head to head with Guy back in the 2021 games. So you still have some athletes here who are, maybe
if there was one event this weekend that I wanted all 20 athletes on the floor for, it's that one. Can you imagine if they had 10 lanes, but they started on opposite sides, all facing each other, moving forward after ever 10, and it was just a step over the bar and hit the buzzer at the end, and you saw, like, what if Royce drew the lane across from Guy? What if Jack drew the lane across from Hopper? Like, there are legitimately 4 or 5 guys that could win that event. It's not a guarantee that those are going to be the top 2. That would be a sick and compelling format if they did that.
Yeah, and even Jack. I mean, Jack won he won.
And Colton.
Yeah, exactly. So these
are guys that's not too heavy. They can move it fast. Their fitness is super high. There's a lot of good snatchers in this field. There's going to be some guys left way behind on heavy Isabel, but there's going to be like 5 or 6 guys that are doing things, and we're just going to be like, what is going on right now? I like that idea. I hope they put all 20 out there at once.
I just don't know if they have the room to do it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, if we had them on long
they start on the opposite sides of the floor and work in.
Yeah, that's true.
There was an event in Dubai that we talked about doing that for. It was the Imam, because it was 30 minutes times all those heats. And if we had enough equipment, we were going to start them on like lanes 1 and 10 and have them kind of work in and rotate back out to see them all at the same time in an event like that. I think it's something that competitions could potentially do.
A name we haven't mentioned much, and I'll let you both talk on him, is Fabian Benito. We did kind of mention that he is flying. He's really the only international athlete in this field outside of the Canadians that's coming in. I mean, Augustin.
No, he's not the only one. Royce Dunn.
And Royce. Well, I haven't, like I said, I haven't talked about those guys yet. But Fabian, this will be his. I don't know outside of the games if he's ever been to the U.S. So this could be.
I was shocked when I saw that he was coming to this.
But you mentioned earlier on the women's side. Do you think the same way with the men's side with someone like Fabian, who, Fabian's one of those guys who he's dealt with some injuries here and there. We've seen the best of him when we watched him in Dubai 2 years ago when he beat Brent Fikowski, he beat Lazar and Luca and Moritz. I mean, against a pretty stacked field. What do you see as the ceiling for Fabian, Brian, and Cait?
Look, I mean, Fabian's amazing, and he's like the influence and impact that he's had in Spain competitively, culturally, for their community there. It's immense and commendable. I mean, he's known as El Presidente there, and he has like definitely raised the overall level of fitness in that country. He doesn't really have it outside of that one performance in Dubai, a competitive, like, landmark performance that would really make me think that he can beat the guys ahead of him on this list, and even some of the ones behind him potentially, depending on how they're coming in for this. But I also docked him a little bit for coming across the pond. Like, he's fitter than most people know, and he hasn't competed in a while, so I'm not 100% sure where his fitness is at. I'm excited. I wasn't even sure that these international athletes were going to come here. Like, someone was saying Royce Dunn last. Like, why? The only reason I could think that Royce would come to this competition is to visit his friends in Cookeville. Like, it doesn't make sense in the context of his life otherwise, to make this trip. And if he is making the trip, I hope he's staying for a month to make the trip worth it. So yeah, with the international athletes, I wasn't really certain. And Fabian in particular, I know how good he can be. I know the things that he's amazing at. Like if there's barbell cycling that comes out, some like fast power output events, he's won Wadapalooza qualifiers, he's won Dubai qualifiers. He's got some potential. Chest bar pull-ups, burpees over the bar, moderate weight dumbbell snatches maybe, but I don't know. I think this is a pretty good spot for him. 13 to 15 seems like the most likely outcome.
Nothing really special behind my pick other than, like Brian said, I think the other athletes above him, I'm not sure if he would place higher than them. Yeah. That's it.
Augustin is someone that's familiar with Cookeville. He's a guy that kind of like, you just don't know if he's where his, I don't know, motivation is sometimes, I guess, when it comes to fitness. I mean, he's obviously fit. I mean, this is a guy who beat Guy, I think, on at least one semifinal to make it to the games. I believe his first trip to the games. He's very fit in certain aspects, but I just don't know if his mind or heart is still in it. Maybe in competing, but I think he has a lot of things going on with his community back in Argentina. I think he helps manage a gym there, and he's built up a great community there. But Brian, where do you see Augustin at this point in his career? And then we can transition over to Royce too as well.
Augustine is well oriented with the Mayhem community with Cookeville. He spent a lot of time there, and I look like for these the I guess the cool thing about these kind of qualifiers this year is that they have autonomy to lean into their community, into their people. And these are people that have put a lot of faith and a lot of trust into the Mayhem brand as getting them to where they want to get to. When it comes to competition, Augustine has world-class potential on a very specific workouts. A couple years ago, top 5 open potential on a couple workouts. I don't know if he still has that now. And even when he was at his best in live competition against athletes that from outside of Latin America, he wasn't able to show that kind of class. So that's why I got him towards the bottom here.
Cait, Royce Dunn, you had at 19th. I mean, is there a particular? I mean, Royce competed last year on a team. Their team did fairly well. He's still obviously pretty fit. He's very strong. But it seems like both you. I mean, what factors played in you putting him at 19th?
Honestly, I know his name, but I had to look him up on the games to kind of see what he's done. I've seen he's done a lot of team stuff, with some exception. A year or two of indie. He's a little bit older of an athlete. I think he's 34. So honestly, that with the team travel, I also saw he's from Australia. All of those things combined, I mean, the rest of the field is a little bit younger, and that plays a part in it for sure. And I will be pleasantly surprised if he places, above the bottom 5.
And then the only athlete we haven't talked to is someone that I've been talking to for at least 2 years now, is Mr. Cale Lehman. I think it's kind of like on the women's side where they kind of invited Lindsay Lane. I thought it was really cool that they invited Cale over. Cale is currently going through, basically, it's a infantry officer school right now. So he's trying to balance that. Just graduated from the U.S. Military Academy. He's from Vermont, has trained out of HWPO. He's done some travel. I mean, he had I think finished 5th in the Open this year. He's really good at body weight stuff, and he's on the shorter side. I believe he's only 5 foot, maybe 5'1". But you both have him at 18, ahead of 2 established games veterans like Royce and Augustine. Do you think that's best case scenario for someone like Cale? And if you're Cale's coach, what would you say to kind of what type of Rocky speech would you give Cale going into this? Will be his biggest competition he's ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say you got nothing to lose. Enjoy it, embrace it. Obviously, you go out there and have the best performances you can, but don't necessarily, like, he should not be disappointed ever coming off the floor. He should view every single chance that he gets to compete as an opportunity. I mean, dude, his best quarterfinals finish is 634th in the world, 173rd in North America. Like, it's not on par with being invited to this competition. And he has that opportunity. That's incredible. Like, seize the moment, seize the opportunity, do your thing. There's probably one workout that he can have a pretty impressive performance on. If it's 2 heats and he's going to be in the first heat, he could win that heat, and then he'll get demolished by the final heat, because there's just better versions of him in that heat. But he's young, and competition experience like this is rare. So I would say, don't forget to enjoy it. The message that people always send, like rookies at the games, enjoy the moments. Realize that you have an opportunity to do something that not everyone is going to get, and you don't know when you're going to get it again, and that he's going to have ample opportunity to learn a ton about himself in a setting that's going to be new for him. So I think it's amazing for him and his coach and his team.
Cait, I'm Cale Lehman. I'm about to go out there for Isabel. What are you going to say to me to get me excited?
Everybody has one damage control event, and that's fine. You just kind of got to do your best, and like Brian said, have fun with it. Like, maybe once in a lifetime experience if he's as good as, his name rang a bell when I was reading who was doing this, because you've talked very highly of him. So I'm sure he will get an experience like this, again. But you can't go out there and be afraid to do something like that when you have an opportunity like that. So, just go and have fun with it, and try to really crush the rest of them.
Well, that's pretty much the men's field.
I do just want to say this.
Yes.
I don't think that Royce Dunn is the least fit person in this field. I just wasn't confident he was actually making the trip.
True. I guess we'll find out. Like I said, we don't know what the next couple minutes will say. I mean, it's a shame that we have to talk it and we're making light of it, making joke of it. But I know, like, we both know the Mayhem people really well, Brian. They're going to put on a first class event. I mean, to do it in Cookeville, the mecca of CrossFit, to have Rich and Sean Woodland on the microphone calling the action, to have Royce and that media team, it's like, it's crazy. And I mean, I know everyone has their reasons for dropping out, but I just think it's no fault of Mayhem. I don't think it's no fault of athlete. I just think that's just where we are right now when it comes to competitive fitness and CrossFit. There's like just a lot of things going on right now. A lot of it in the comments where people don't know what the season looks like. I mean, hopefully stuff like this will make it so that way next year things do have some type of schedule, some type of normalcy, and make someone make a decision and stick with it. But
though, like, there has been athletes that have dropped out of Wadapalooza for the last couple of years. Like, that is, I'm confused by those comments a little bit, because we've seen that at almost every competition, I feel like.
And I would also just lean into something we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks in general, which is we're going to have an opportunity to see more high-level athletes do more competitions this year. And that doesn't just mean that you're going to see James Sprague do 9 events instead of 6. That means that you're going to see names in fields like this that you might not be accustomed to. And if you want to learn the most about those athletes, you know where to come.
True. Any final words on this?
Good luck to all the athletes. I've talked to a lot of them. They seem super excited about this. Mayhem Classic is a rare commodity. I mean, 5 years ago, it was a premium event when the athletes, if you talk to any of the athletes or people who went to that, you'll know that it was really, really well done, as everything that they do is. And I hope that all of these athletes, they're coming in there with a purpose, most of them. Some of those purposes are not the same. Some of them are very, very actively seeking a game spot and some good payouts here. Others are seeking competition experience or to see some old friends, but they're all coming there for something. They're going to get a good experience. If you're going this weekend, have a great time. It's a special thing that you'll be able to experience. And I saw someone was asking, I don't know where, about a live stream, but yeah, it will be streamed. You'll be able to watch it. And if you've seen the stuff that's been streamed from Mayhem before, they have figured out how to set it up so that it's a pretty good viewing experience too. So should be a fun weekend for fitness fans everywhere. And I would say, yeah, but always a bummer to see big names drop out, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a good competitive weekend in Tennessee. And I would just focus on that and enjoying it.
Cait, will you be watching it this weekend?
I will be watching it, of course. Glued to my phone.
Because we have a recap show next week on this.
Can't wait to see if it was me or Brian.
Yeah.
In the correct predictions.
We'll start keeping track of the stats. That's what it's doing. There's a couple things, some housekeeping, not really housekeeping notes, but some things that we kind of like, there's significant stuff going on in the community. One thing I did want to bring up is a lot of people in the chat were talking about this earlier. And, she's kind of wanted to bring in and say congratulations to Ross and Lauren Fisher. Looks like Lauren, who just announced her retirement, is also pregnant. So congratulations, those two. They're great. Lauren is one of the first CrossFit athletes that I started following, and getting a chance to know her and get to know her over the last couple of years has been great. And this is, I'm really excited for both of them and this chapter of their life. So, congratulations to those two. They're going to be amazing parents. Some great genetics going to come out of this family.
Well, and this is one of my favorite relationships at the high level of competitive fitness, because we talk about it a lot, that there's been this disconnect from North America and Europe or the rest of the world when it comes to the evolution of this thing. As those communities and competitions have continued to rise, there just hasn't been this kind of collaboration. And this, there's some great relationships in the history of our sport, but to have someone from Denmark and someone from the United States that have traveled the world together, helped to spread that community across the world in different ways through their businesses, their competitions, their coaching. Patrick, you and I have each had a chance to hang out with them in a lot of different countries at a lot of different events. And I just think it's a cool story. So, congratulations to them on this. And, if you're not following these guys, I don't think that because they're done competing, that they're done contributing to the community that we're a part of.
No, not at all. Yeah. Cait, do you have anything to say? How does it feel?
No, Lauren was one of the first people that I started following when I did CrossFit too. So it's really cool to have seen her progression through the sport and kind of transition into a more normal life, if you will. But I agree that I think she's going to be still a prominent person in the space, whether she's competing or not.
And another thing, literally, share it. 1 day left for registration for Metcon Rush. This is a competition that, I think we're finally going to be able to broadcast, right, Brian?
It was the first one on my calendar for this year. Been talking to Tim for 3 years. We're finally making it happen. Every division is open signups except for the elite division. If you want to do that, you can send a message to them in the DMs, and they'll get back to you and let you know if you get a spot. So they sold out last year in every single division. Tim is I think he's kind of one of the under the radar guys in terms of high caliber competition organizers. It's a tough place to put on a competition in the East Coast, and the further north you get, especially, things are just expensive there. But he's found a great way to integrate with his community, with some of the supporting businesses around there. And he's constantly looking to level up the competition experience for anyone in all the divisions. And yeah, B.Friendly Fitness will be there on site to do some storytelling. We'll live stream. Him and I have been going back and forth about some different options that we want to explore. So don't know the full extent of what that will look like yet, but we'll definitely be there to help get some increased exposure for what I have been told is a really, really well-run competition.
Yeah, I've had a couple athletes that I've represented compete there, and they said it's really well ran. And talking to Freya, who won it last year, she's like, she's pretty much retired from competition, but this is the one I think that she'd circle and come back for because it was so well ran. That's coming from someone from Canada, coming all the way in for it. So,
can you pull up the Turco Tomiopaiva qualifiers? They just announced this is another competition. We doing my third year working on it. We're doing it this summer as well in the end of June in the night, what they call the nightless nights in Finland. So if you want to throw your name in the mix to compete at a competition that is programmed by Joona Koski, I saw the qualifier workouts come out today. They have a 2-parter, and when you see a 2-parter, you almost always assume it's going to be a heavy lift. Their second part of their qualifier is max handstand hold. It's the middle one there, 2A and 2B. And I love this because I was thinking about it. The first time that we saw a 2-part a 2-part workout pop up in the open was 10 years ago. It was a max lift. And we've seen that over and over and over again. And the first time we saw a max gymnastics thing like this show up was 5 years ago in the online qualifier for the games with the max handstand hold. And outside of Wadapalooza, which still programmed that was a live competition, and it was also offset by a weightlifting event. When have you seen this program before? And what is the difference in our sport, which is supposed to test a wide variety of things, of testing a max capacity gymnastics implement compared to testing a max snatch? Especially when you run through the list of the 10 general physical skills, like there are quite a few that you need to do really well on a max handstand hold. And you have to practice that same way that you do if you want to be good at a heavy lift or a heavy complex. So I thought this was a really cool kind of twist in there. And last year they did do a max L-sit at Turku. That's right. So anyway, the qualifiers are out. And, throw your name in the mix. This is a super impressive competition to attend and be a part of as an athlete or a fan. And it's at a really beautiful time of year in Scandinavia. So love to see some of you guys there competing or just coming to enjoy a beautiful country and a really well-run competition.
I have a feeling it seems like the last couple of years, it's gotten bigger in terms of like elite athletes. I have a feeling this year I think you're going to see, some more well-known athletes there as well. Just from,
and fingers crossed,
Yeah.
maybe someone from the United States. My buddy Nikita is taking these on. He's already done one of the events today, and he had his best finish by some substantial margin this year in the open as well. So I'm excited to see if he can make it, because if he does, he'll come with me.
That's cool. Cait, what do you got planned this weekend? This week, actually, I keep on saying weekend. This week, anything going on in your life?
My parents are coming to visit from Illinois, coming down to Florida for 2 weeks, so they're going to be staying with me. I have to work a lot, but that's cool. Otherwise, nothing crazy. What about you? Are you traveling?
And Brian, I have to work tomorrow till Thursday, and then I'm off to the UK for a 4-day weekend.
You got your permit to travel there?
I did. It took an hour. I took an hour. I completely forgot about it, but I remember the conversation we had about it. I did it on the online app. So now you have to have a visa to get into the UK, and they have to approve it. So I got approved in an hour. Luckily, I'm not a felon. So obviously, if you're a felon, I think it's a little bit harder to travel. But yeah, the plan is me and three of the soldiers here. We're going to go to the UK. The plan is Saturday to meet up with Craig Ritchie and Jasmine at an Aston Villa game, which Aston Villa with a huge win this weekend to move on in the FA Cup. So that's my new Premier team. Well, it's not new. I've been a big fan, but so I'll be able to see my first Premier League soccer game. So I'm pretty excited.
Oh, yeah. I've only been to one. It was a great experience. I'm sure you'll embrace all of it. I would recommend going to the bars early, going to the bars after, get the full thing, all the singing, all the, what happens.
Yeah. And to experience it with like Craig too, like me, anytime I can experience with Jazz and Craig, it's usually a good time. And they're in Birmingham, and I already know Birmingham because I stayed there for Fit Fest, and there's a really good Moxie there. Figured out it's cool. I'm looking forward to it. And then also, like, I'll keep an eye out for Mayhem. Hopefully this week we'll get some news, maybe on the finalization of the WFP qualifiers. If that happens, expect a show next week where we'll go over that as well for like a weekly WFP show. But besides that, I don't know. Am I missing anything in terms of news out there? I don't think so.
Nothing happening.
Yeah. But I will say, where is it? Here, Craig said, "You're good job. Great job today."
That was actually scary, so thank you.
One person said you did a good job, so good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks everyone for showing up. A shout out to HCR CBD as always, providing support so that way we can continue on and do amazing shows like that. There he is, Brian, with it. Look at that. I did a workout Friday.
That's the news. You did a workout.
Yeah, that's the news. I did a workout. I almost did 2 that day. I almost got talked into a couple of them because obviously the C23 crew with Jackie, John Singleton, and luckily a lot of athletes were out of town. I did have dinner with Adrian Munweiler for our niece's birthday, so that was kind of actually get to sit down and have a conversation with Adrian. Really cool dude. Brian, I know you had a couple conversations with him in the past, but it's just really cool. I would highly recommend Mallorca if you ever get a chance to go. It's definitely I want to go back in the summer and actually check out and swim in the ocean in the Mediterranean. But yeah, I'll probably need something recovery for HCR CBD. So we appreciate their support. We appreciate everyone in the comments. Appreciate Cait and Brian for coming on the show. It was really cool. Hopefully, I think the next semifinal after this is the Copa Sur, which is April 18th and 20th. So that gives you guys almost 2 weeks to get up to date on who's competing at Copa Sur, because we will probably do a small preview show on that, as well as a recap, just to keep this stuff going. So like I said, it's about the athletes. We covered athletes. I don't know. Am I missing anything, Brian?
Is it Wildlands coming up pretty soon too?
Yeah, after Copa Sur. That's April 25th, 27th, and then and then it's the online semifinal, and then French Throwdown is the same weekend as Indy WFP.
Lots going on. It's fun.
Yeah, which all 3 of us will unfortunately not be in France. We'll be in Indianapolis. So, yeah, looking forward to that. So, with Lynn said the trio did awesome. Yep. So,
thanks,
that was
Lynn.
cool. This is Brian's first time with Cait, right? On with Cait, right?
First time. Yep.
Yep.
I think.
So,
yeah.
Brian, you held your own. Good job. I know he's nervous. But yeah, thanks everyone in the comments. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Cait. We'll see you guys next week. We'll probably hopefully have 2 shows. And enjoy the rest of the week. And as always, be friendly, our friends.